Well, Josh Allen, I'm not going to say he locked up the MVP, but he's got to be the front runner by a wide margin, Jack. I mean, wide margin. I think he's clearly the most valuable player in the league. Can you imagine the Bills without him?
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Monster Monday that I am recording on a Sunday night from my Phoenix area hotel room because taking the red eye back to Philadelphia late tonight. I want to make sure you guys have this for your morning workouts, your morning commutes. So, programming note, we're about midway through the third quarter, and the Packers are putting it on the Seahawks. So, I'll tell you what I saw in the first half, which is the Packers whooping that you-know-what. But if some other stuff happens, of course, we can clean it up on Tuesday's Power Rankings Tuesday. New week means new winners. Please spread the word via social media. So easy to do. You can just rate and review the show or reply or comment on any post on any platform at Ross Tucker Pod, and you'll be the winner. I sent about half of the winners signed press passes out last weekend. Hopefully I can get to some more this upcoming week, although I do have 2 games that I'll be doing. Sponsor confirmation email winner, so we can take advantage of any of our sponsors. Love those of you that make the YouTube comments, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Absolutely am obsessed with those of you that go ahead and rate and review the show. That means a lot to us. It is Big Show time, which is, of course, presented by Labatt Blue Light. Drink some Labatt Blue Lights with your friends. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. It's delicious beer. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York.
The Big Show.
All right, Ross. So what are your overall themes from Week 15 across the NFL so far?
One of them, Jack, since I had a late game, one of them was that the late games were much better than the early games, really other than mine, which was the Patriots and the Cardinals. But in particular, the 1 o'clock games, for a while there weren't really any one-score games or many one-score games. At least, the Saints came back to make that one competitive. The Dolphins came back to make that one competitive. But for a while there, it was not a great sign for the NFL where those 1 o'clock games were. They weren't all that entertaining. So that was one that jumped out to me. The one that was a one-score game the whole time and very entertaining was the Jets and the Jags, actually. So that was one of my takeaways, is that the early games were really not that great. Another takeaway, a lot of scoring. Felt like a lot of scoring. I mean, I think a lot of us anticipated that from that game between the Bills and the Lions, which absolutely lived up to the hype, at least from a scoring perspective. And the Lions made it a one-score game late. Very similar, by the way, score-wise to the Bills-Rams last week. It's kind of bananas, actually, that they played in 2 games like that, back-to-back. But that was another big takeaway, was just a lot of points. Even the Jets and Jags, the aforementioned Jets and Jags, scored a lot of points. So you don't see that very often. Titans-Bengals. The other thing I guess I would say, speaking of Titans-Bengals, felt like there were a lot of wild, careless turnovers in the games. I mean, Will Levis kind of reverted back to some of the things that we've seen from Will Levis earlier in the year. You think about Jonathan Taylor dropping the ball as he's going in for a touchdown. Absolutely cannot happen. There is no excuse for that whatsoever. And it's just a killer. It's an absolute killer when he does that. But the Cowboys put up 30 points. That was another one that was low scoring, high scoring. The Ravens put up 35. I mentioned Arizona Cardinals put up 30. I mentioned the Bengals 37. Titans 27. Broncos ended up putting up 31 points, even though they were trailing late in that game. The Bucs put up 40. So I would say high-scoring games was one of the ones that jumped out. But yes, the careless turnovers. I mean, you go right down the line with the games. Bryce Young had a bunch of careless turnovers. Jameis Winston, Tua Tagovailoa, the Giants, of course. Both Burrow for the Bengals and Will Levis did. Not too bad. The Colts, I mentioned Jonathan Taylor, and then that throwback pass that Benito took back for a touchdown. Just some wild turnovers, swing turnovers that made a big, big difference in the games. That's probably the other one, and maybe the most interesting or unique of the things that jumped out to me, Jack. Anything else jump out to you from watching all the games? You were just watching Red Zone or whatever all day.
Yeah, I mean, there was kind of, like you mentioned, the turnovers was one big thing that stood out. It felt like there was a lot of injuries. Like, Mahomes has the ankle. There's whatever's going on with TJ Watt. Josh Allen got an x-ray, but they said that was precautionary, so I don't know what really to think there.
That's a good point. There's an ankle sprain for Watt and Mahomes. That didn't look great. That's a good point. Eagles felt like a bunch of their players, and these are like the best players in the league that were getting banged up. I think that's a pretty good point as well. Let's dive into the games. I love learning, and I love how many of you like to make the games more interesting by betting on them. Let's combine those two. Masterclass is a new class. It's called Bet Smart, Top Sports Betting Strategies, and it's buddies of mine that are involved. Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN, Nick Costos from You Better You Bet for Odyssey. They're going to give you the techniques that you should at least be aware of if you are even considering betting at all and making the games more interesting. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/Ross for the current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/Ross. Masterclass.com/Ross. And remember, all sports betting involves risks, and you are responsible for complying with all sports betting laws in your jurisdiction. A lot of holiday parties going on. Hopefully everywhere you go, or certainly if you're hosting the party, they have Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka and an official vodka partner of the NFL. Obviously, more opportunities this year to watch football and make delicious Smirnoff cocktails than ever before. We already had Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Now there's 2 games on Christmas. Then you got the Saturday games after that. This holiday season, when you're enjoying the game and your cocktails, please make sure to drink responsibly. Take a minute, make a plan, never drive impaired. Smirnoff, we do game days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff #21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age.
All right, we're going to start with the Carolina Panthers, who did not look as good as they were on offense, and the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys. Their thin playoff hopes are still alive with a 30-14 win.
This was surprising. And, programming note, we will record College Draft early like we always do on Monday morning. But for those of you that are big fans of Even Money Podcast, and a lot of you are, it was an absolute bloodbath for me. I mean, bloodbath in a bad way in terms of the bets I made, what I thought would happen, and that's betting. And that also, by the way, is what I like about the NFL. I really thought Carolina, they were favored. I thought they had a great chance to win the game, but I thought at a minimum they would keep it close after the way they've been playing and with the Cowboys playing Monday night. Cowboys defense got all over them. Micah Parsons, who for my money is, I don't know if he's the best defensive player in the NFL. I think he's the most unique defensive player in the NFL, maybe the most gifted. Just ridiculous change of direction. He was in the backfield all game. Odighizuwa was back there as well. Very, very disappointed by Bryce Young in this game. Very disappointed. He had been on a good trajectory, had been playing better and better, but 2 fumbles, 2 interceptions. They are very, very fortunate that they even got that long touchdown to Adam Thielen. Without that, the score would have been even worse. That was like the only big play that the Cowboys defense allowed, 80-some yards on a busted coverage. The other thing that jumped out, I give Mike McCarthy credit. You know, they've kind of figured out who their running back is with Rico Dowdell. Kudos to Rico for making the most of his opportunity. And Cooper Rush, I thought, did a good job. They did a really good job of getting the ball to CeeDee Lamb early, especially on that first drive. He had catches of 20, 28, 14 on the first drive. That's a nice job right there by Mike McCarthy to get your best player involved like that.
Kansas City, they get the win over Cleveland, but the big thing was something we mentioned earlier. Mahomes, he leaves early in his week 2 week with an ankle injury.
That is obviously something that we will be watching extremely closely moving forward. You know, it did not look good. I mean, it's unbelievable. The guy, if he doesn't miss any time, the guy is like Gumby. I'm just blown away that he is able to, you know, suffer injuries like that look that bad and maybe still be able to play next week. I mean, you just wouldn't expect that typically from the way that looked. You know, it's funny because the Chiefs aren't like that overwhelming on offense. They banged it out with Kareem Hunt and Pacheco. Patrick Mahomes finds a way on third down to convert them. The Browns made their typical mistakes. You can't muff a punt against the Chiefs and give them a touchdown like that. Jameis Winston throwing the ball up for grabs. He was eventually benched for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'll tell you this much. We've been talking about how the Chiefs' defense hadn't been as good, and John Daigle on the Fantasy Feast talked about the lack of pressure they've been getting. They got pressure in this game. Holy cow. It felt like Karlaftis, Tranquil, Chris Johnson, they were in the backfield almost right away. Not a good look for the Browns O-line.
Miami, their playoff hopes plummet with a 2012 loss to the Houston Texans, who secured their place with an AFC South divisional bid.
Right. They win their game. The Colts lose theirs. It's over. You know, the Dolphins can't win. Well, first of all, to not have Teron Armstead and Kendall Lamb, their two starting tackles, that was tough. That's a bad matchup against Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, to not have your tackles like that for the Dolphins. And I think that partially led to the turnovers by Tua. But how about Derek Stingley? I mean, that was so impressive to get those 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter. That is why you take a corner with the number 3 overall pick, or whenever it is that they got him. That is why you do things like that. Super impressive. Maybe the biggest play of the game, though, if it wasn't the interceptions by Stingley, it was the fake punt to Agumbawale, because the Texans didn't really do much offensively. I mean, kudos to the Dolphins defense. The Dolphins defense came to play. That was actually probably their best game in a while on the road. They stuffed Mixon, but Stroud did enough with the 2 touchdowns, and the turnovers by Tua were killer.
An unexpectedly exciting game. The Jets, they get a last-second touchdown to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 32-25.
Yeah, and I was not expecting to say that Devontae Adams had the 11 Oaks hungriest performance of the week. Genuine Wagyu beef, Angus beef, heritage breed pork, free-range chicken. It's delicious. You've seen my stuff on social media, Facebook and Instagram, at Ross Tucker NFL. You can shop in person at the farm store. Huge curated selection of kitchen and pantry items. Family-owned business, which we love. 11oaksfarms.com. 11oaksfarms.com. Devontae Adams, so much respect for the way he played. Look, their season is over. I don't even think he had a catch till like the third quarter, and they go out there and put the team single-handedly on your back, almost 200 yards receiving, all in the second half. That is incredible. Kudos to Devontae Adams. I love veteran guys that are reliable and they're still playing their heart out in quote-unquote meaningless games. That's why Devontae Adams is my winner this week of the hungriest performance. Other than that, Jack, you know, Brian Thomas Jr., he was almost as good as Devontae Adams on the other side. He was fantastic in this game, and it felt like the Jags had control of it until they could not stop the Jets to save their life late in the game.
Washington, they were ones that held on for dear life with a 20-19 last-second win over the Saints.
Yeah, what the heck, man? It was 17-0. They were absolutely rolling. Jaden Daniels was back going against his, the team where he went to college at LSU. He's 80% completion percentage. Throwing it to Terry McLaurin. He actually missed McLaurin a couple times. But the point is Washington looked awesome. Looked like they were going to have a very comfortable win, like I expected. Kudos to Darren Rizzi. He benched Jake Haener at halftime. Haener was not playing well. And then the next thing you know, Spencer Rattler comes out. I think they scored on like every possession maybe in the second half. Rattler was awesome. Programming note, Rattler will start until Derek Carr comes back. They should actually they should actually start Rattler the rest of the year. I know he had a chance earlier, but we've seen this with other quarterbacks, Richardson, Bryce Young, that play, then they sit. I think I'd rather see what Rattler has for the rest of the year if you're the Saints to see what he can. But he hit deep shots to Valdez-Scantling. I thought Rizzi made the right call going for 2 in that situation. That would have been a brutal, brutal loss for the Commanders, but they got it.
The Ravens, they stomped the Giants 35-14.
Without even scoring on their first 2 drives. I mean, the first 2 drives were not good for the Ravens, and you thought, uh-oh, what's going on here? It didn't matter. I mean, Lamar Jackson was almost flawless in the game. Rashad Bateman had a couple touchdowns. That's kind of surprising, right? We haven't seen him do something like that. They didn't even need to use Derrick Henry that much. Meanwhile, I'm watching the Giants. I'm watching the game, and Tim Boyle's out there for the Giants. I didn't even know Tim Boyle was on the Giants. Like, what is happening? I'm watching an NFL game. I thought Tim Boyle was still with the Dolphins. Like, what is going on that the Giants quarterback in a game is Tim Boyle? Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable that that's who they have playing for them at this point of the season. Ravens had a bunch of penalties. Who cares? They won anyway by a lot. Lamar was awesome.
Next up, Cincinnati, they beat the Titans despite some costly mistakes that we mentioned earlier, 37-27.
Yeah, Burrow had a couple picks, and the Titans had the lead. That was actually one of the other themes, Jack, is teams blowing or almost blowing big leads, because the Titans had a lead, and then the Bengals came back. Levis got benched. I'll be very curious to see if they put Levis back in there for the next game for the Titans, or if they just ride out with Mason Rudolph. You have to think at this point now that they've probably made the decision that they're going to be in the quarterback market and that Levis isn't the guy, which is huge because, you either have the guy or you don't. I think the Titans realized they don't, even though he played pretty well in that game I did earlier. The Bengals, they even fumbled a touchdown away, battle on the fumble return, kicked it out of the back of the end zone. It's another touchdown the Bengals could have. Score could have been actually even worse.
A game you might know a thing or two about, the Cardinals, they got a much-needed win at home, 30-17.
I just realized I forgot to post the press box food from Arizona, which I will figure out somehow, some way to do at some point this week. So, Jack, don't let me forget to post that at some point. It was very good. I had an awesome salad, and then they had this crazy, pork loin, and they would cut it up into, they would slice it up, and I put that on top of my bed of lettuce and, carrots and cucumbers, trying to be healthy. They had ice cream at halftime. I had a Snickers ice cream bar and a Chipwich. They had Coke Zero. It was definitely an A for Arizona. And that was their performance on the field, primarily led by James Conner. I kind of agree with Greg Cosell that we kind of know who Kyler Murray is. There's going to be kind of ups and downs. He's better when he gets outside of the pocket. But this team goes as James Conner goes. This team needs to continue to find a way to get him involved. He had 110 yards rushing. He did a good job receiving as well. Scored a couple of touchdowns. I was very impressed by James Conner. Meanwhile, for the Patriots, they have 2 of the best young players in the NFL. First of all, Drake May, thoroughly impressed. Even the one interception, Jack, he was trying to have Booty sit down in the middle of the zone so he didn't run him into Budda Baker and get smashed. And Booty, I think, should have throttled down a little bit earlier, and then he drops the ball and throws it to a guy for the Cardinals. Thoroughly impressed by Drake May prepping for the game. Only came out more impressed. I think he missed one throw that I noticed to Booty over the middle of the field. That's it. Had a good rushing touchdown, had a bomb to Kendrick Bourne, had a slick, like, shovel pass touchdown, Farvian, if you will. Just thoroughly impressed by. And Christian Gonzalez, holy crap, Jack, I don't know how much you got to watch. Christian Gonzalez put Marvin Harrison Jr. on absolute lockdown. I mean, whenever he was traveling with him, except for the first play, which was a shallow cross, and Gonzalez it was a man beater and got caught up in the wash. Other than that, Gonzalez, like Harrison Jr. couldn't get any separate. Well, he got separation on the one, and then Gonzalez ripped the ball up through. Super, super impressed by Christian Gonzalez. The Patriots just, their roster's horrific. I mean, it's one of the worst rosters in the NFL, if not the worst roster in the NFL. They need to get better at a lot of positions, but at least they have two foundational pieces. And for the Cardinals, it might be too late for the playoffs, but they're 7-7. I mean, that'd be an impressive year if they can get to 10 or even 9 wins off of winning 4 last year. I think Gannon and those guys have them going in the right direction.
The Broncos came out in the second half just swinging in a 31-13 blowout of the Indianapolis Colts.
How do you win 31-13 when you throw 3 interceptions like Bo Nix did? I'll tell you how. The other team fumbles the ball before they go into the end zone. They drop it like Jonathan Taylor. You have a Nick Bonito, who, by the way, should absolutely be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. You have a Nick Bonito pick 6. I mean, he might even be, I don't know who the favorite is, but he should be up there, like way, way up there. You have Marvin Mims making plays on special teams. I mean, these are all the things that happen and have to happen for you to win that much when your quarterback throws 3 picks. I'll say this, though. Bo Nix just keeps battling. Bo Nix keeps firing. That's one of the things I love about him. You know, even though they were down, he didn't let it get to him. Love that. Anthony Richardson, you can't play. It's very hard to play in the NFL when your quarterback misses some of the throws that he misses. I don't know if it's ever going to happen for him, that he's going to be more consistent with some of those throws that he misses, because it's rough.
A game that certainly lived up to the hype. The Bills, they win in a shootout with the Lions, 48-42.
Well, Josh Allen, I'm not going to say he locked up the MVP, but he's got to be the front runner by a wide margin, Jack. I mean, wide margin. I think he's clearly the most valuable player in the league. Can you imagine the Bills without him? I mean, it's just incredible to watch. He's so entertaining. The Lions could not stop him. So the good news for the Bills, obviously, is they're firing on all cylinders, and they ran the ball so well with James Cook, which is such an awesome sign for them moving forward, that they've got James Cook running that well. But on the flip side, for the Lions, I'm so sad about these injuries. This time it was Carlton Davis and Aleem McNeil, and Dan Campbell said after the game that it might be season ending for both those guys. What the heck? I'm so upset for Lions fans. You know, it's just not cool. Like, they have such a great team. Jared Goff threw for over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks, and they still lost. That doesn't happen in the NFL. I just am very, very sad right now about the Lions injuries. No, I'm not a Lions fan, never played for them, nothing like that, but it still bothers me quite a bit. I don't know if they're going to be able to overcome it. I don't know if they're going to be able to overcome these injuries that they're suffering right now. It's very, very disappointing.
Mike Evans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers explode on offense in a 40-17 beatdown of the LA Chargers.
That surprised me. I was not expecting it to be this lopsided. Early on, there was some turnovers by the Bucs, which kept the Chargers in it. After that, it was every time you watched, it was like Mike Evans catching bombs, Bucky Irving going for long runs. He makes a difference when he's back in the lineup for them, for sure. Mike Evans was incredible. Again, 159 yards. He is, to me, easily a Hall of Famer. And the Chargers, they were horrible on both sides of the ball. They gave up over 500 yards of offense, and they did nothing themselves offensively.
Philadelphia's defense shuts down the Pittsburgh Steelers without George Pickens, 27-13.
They did. Now, there were some costly penalties for the Steelers, and the Najee Harris fumble, that was an absolute killer, obviously. But other than that, you're right. The Eagles' defense was excellent. Story of the game, though, I thought was Jalen Hurts and the Eagles' passing game. Their offensive line so good. The Steelers were all in on trying to stop Saquon Barkley and make Jalen Hurts beat him, which, by the way, is exactly what you should do, right? Like, make Jalen Hurts make the throws. The problem is when he does. When he does make the throws, then you've got major, major problems, and that's exactly what happened in this game. Hurts was making the throws left and right, and the Eagles, Jake Elliott was good. I said that in the Ross Report on social media, at Ross Tucker NFL, but just thoroughly impressed by Hurts getting the ball to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in this one, and super, super important win for the Eagles, who now are tied atop the NFC with the Detroit Lions.
They just controlled the game against Seahawks in a big primetime matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's not over yet. Now that we're still talking, but nothing's changed. It's 23-6. It's been totally dominant by the Packers up front. I got to tell you, I think the Packers are going to be a tough out in the playoffs. If they can play this way up front, I watched a lot of the Seahawks getting ready because they played in the last 3 weeks. The Seahawks had been beating up other people up front, and now the Packers came out and they beat them up front, both sides of the ball. Huge win for the Packers unless the Seahawks score 3 touchdowns in the next 8 minutes. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. You got to love myfrontpagestory.com. Best holiday gift I've ever heard of. And if you get one for a loved one, I promise I will send you a signed autograph in the mail. Backofficeschedule.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.